Christopher Luxon's first week in the top job wasn't exactly plain sailing, and it finished with him being forced to admit his government had got it wrong when claiming there would have been only one tobacco retailer in Northland, which would have become a target for criminals. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon is with us this morning for his first interview as the PM. Good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
Can we start with Tatu order? Have you had a briefing on this staff member who has allegedly taken data from Tatu order and put it online? Do you have an update on exactly what that data was?
Look, as I understand it, it was anonymised data, so it wasn't specific to, identifiable to any particular individuals as such. Health New Zealand, frankly, did a very good job over the weekend, working in conjunction with Minister Shane Reti to make sure that they could actually ascertain what had been taken. They put an injunction in place and had data taken down from other sites, which was fantastic. Worked with New Zealand Police. Someone was arrested late last night.
OK, do you know, they said, Tatu order said this individual had extreme views. Do you know what the views are?
No, I think it was in conjunction with vaccinations and what we really, and as I said, they moved very, very quickly to try and identify how much data had been taken and actually pulled it down from sites that it may have been uploaded to. So the good news is, I was impressed with the way that they took it very seriously. They've worked pretty hard, Minister Reti and them have been in constant contact through the weekend just to make sure that that data is definitely is anonymised. So it's not, as we understand, it doesn't include anyone's names, it doesn't include anyone's health numbers. It's just essentially it's been stopped with a good injunction, and importantly the police are now involved, arrested someone late last night.
All right, let's talk about the smoke-free legislation that you are going to repeal. Do you know how many, Can you say how many lives might be lost because you're making the change?
Well, again, that's not been our approach. What's happened here is that our party and others opposed this legislation as it came through the Parliament just before the election. Just remember, none of this has been implemented, none of it has taken effect at this stage, and what we're wanting to do is to continue to actually make sure we lower smoking over the coming years and decades, as we have done over the last few. 8% of New Zealanders now smoke regularly or daily. That's halved over the space of just 10 years. We're going to continue that work of actually making sure we bring smoking rates down. We just don't agree that the government's policy and the way that it was going to go about it, which it announced and passed legislation before the election, was the right way to go.
OK, we can talk about that, but have you even asked the question how many lives might be lost because I'm making this change?
No, I haven't. What I have focused on, though, is actually realising that concentrating distribution to 600 outlets across the whole of New Zealand means that in some towns you'll have 1 or 2 outlets only. That'll become a massive magnet for crime. We see it already that dairies are taking it in the neck each and every day. We don't want to exacerbate that.
OK, not arguing with that, and also a lot of those dairies have told us that they might go out of business if they can't sell their cigarettes. But why not? Do you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater? Would you consider, OK, repealing this legislation, but then bringing in new legislation to keep the nicotine reduction plan, to keep stop the sale of cigarettes to the next generation? Are you open to keeping some of those measures through new legislation?
Well, as I said, we're going to continue to work on bringing smoking rates down. They have halved over the space of just the last 10 years, and we'll continue our efforts around that. Things like making cigarettes not available, increasing the excise tax, which we did just last week again, and making sure we have ongoing education. That will continue to be important. But we just disagree with the government that there are unintended consequences.
I know, but it's quite
it's just a difference of opinion.
Yeah, sorry. It's quite a specific point that you disagree with, though, and that is the sale through these particular outlets. What about all the rest of the legislation? Are you open to making some of those changes through new legislation, or has Winston specifically stopped you from doing that?
No, not at all. We'll continue to drive smoking rates down here in New Zealand. I've seen various reports that we're going backwards on our legislation. We're not going backwards. We're just not taking forward what the government delivered before the election. We don't believe that it's going to be easy to discriminate between a 36 and a 35-year-old who can or can't smoke into the future. We don't think that actually limiting distribution will create a massive magnet for crime, but more importantly also a big black market. And so we just disagree with the approach. We think that approach will have unintended consequences which we don't support, but we desperately do support continuing to drive smoking rates down across this country.
Doesn't it work, though, for under 18s? the cigarette thing? I mean, we can differentiate between a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old through a simple ID check.
Yeah, I just think it gets pretty difficult to sort of manage going forward. But the major reason is that limiting distribution creates a black market and ultimately will create more crime.
Right. So it's going forward, you think it's more difficult to differentiate between a 35 and 36-year-old than it would be between a 17 and an 18-year-old?
We just think that there's other ways we can go about it. You know, we've seen a huge adoption of vapes, for example, for adults trying to get off smoking. That has been one of the big drivers of actually getting smoking rates halved in the last decade. We'll continue the education work. We'll also continue to strengthen penalties for people selling vapes to kids under the age of 18. And so we'll have a comprehensive smoking and vaping policy to continue to march it down. But what we're not going to do is actually support a government policy that's not even taken effect yet, doesn't take effect ultimately for another 3 years, and actually we just don't align and didn't align even when the legislation came through. That was legislation, or that was the right answer to solve the problems that we've got.
All right, Prime Minister, we've got about 20 seconds left on the clock, but have you got any update on the situation in Gaza?
No, just in terms of it's just heartbreaking to see the breakdown of cessation of hostilities. You know, we wanted that to continue to an extent. We now need and urge all parties to actually get back to the negotiating table. We want to see a pathway to a long-term ceasefire. For that to happen, all parties have to sign up for that. That means that Hamas needs to stop the attacks on Israel, it needs to stop using civilian infrastructure, civilian shields, and release all hostages. And equally, it means for Israel that it actually can't carry on creating the huge amount of civilian loss of life that we've seen in recent weeks as it heads into south of Gaza. So, you know, the long-term future here is to get people back around the negotiating table to make sure we start the Middle East peace process, because military action isn't going to deliver peace in the Middle East.
All right, Prime Minister, thank you very much for your time, and congratulations again on the swearing in last week. That is the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, at Parliament. It's 10 to 7.